concert promoter did a discriminatory publicity stunt that was hugely successful. And after a mild backlash, he's playing the victim card. And so long as it suits their narrative, the Washington Post is all too happy to play along. Today, we'll be looking at this article where they talk about a punk rock band starting a concert that charges $18 a head, and unless you don't have that vax card, then they're charging you $1,000 a pop. So, let's run through it. Let's run through the manipulation tactics. All told, not as bad as a lot of the ones we've seen. We'll take a quick look at the new tool we have. The 6 shape is what I'm calling it. Boom, right here. This gives you a quick little visual representation of some of the bullshit going on in the article. So the each of these things is rated on a 1 to 4 scale, or 0 to 3 is maybe an easier way to understand it with the visual scale. So emotionality, source anonymity. I mean, it's good practices to not out your sources oftentimes, but if the source is, we have this giant thing according to 2 anonymous people, that often reeks of bullshit. If they have a specific quote coming from a specific named person, that's something you can follow up on. See if that specific person actually exists, and if they actually said that specific quote. That lends a lot more credence to the story. Next one is opacity. How clear is the story? How muddy is it? Can we actually tell what they're talking about? Is it just a bunch of gobbledygook? Then irrelevancy. Is the story something that actually matters to the reader? Or is it just something the writers of this media piece are pushing out for their own agenda? Who cares about what's being said here? Us or them? Unknowability. Is what they're writing about something that is demonstrable, that's provable, or is it something that, we're never gonna know? It's, at the end of the day, there's just, there's my take and there's your take. And they're just gonna opine and bullshit around about it and use a lot of weasel logic. Right? The more unknowable something is, then the less it belongs to be printed in news. And the last one, opinion-y. How much is this a fact piece? How much is it an opinion piece? So, on this one, it's not that bad. None of the points reach the maximum. And, the anonymity is actually at a 0. Every source I saw was fully checkable, named, cited. So yeah, that's something you can just glance at and get an idea of, what type of BS they're using in the article. Alright, now let's go back to the tried and true, to the 5 sheet here. Start running through the article. Manipulation tactics in this one: undue emotion, straw man feigning ignorance, and one side of the story. So starting with undue emotion, had a couple of quotes here. First one: but he said he was unprepared for the vitriol that followed. The he here is the concert promoter, the guy who came up with this discriminatory scheme where he charged people over 10 times as much, or like almost 100 times as much. What is it, like 50 times as much, or whatever that math works out to, 18 versus 1,000, based on whether or not they're willing to disclose that medical information. And also, like, if you have certain disabilities, certain immunocompromised conditions, you're not really able to get vaccinated, so you should have to pay the $1,000 if you're in that protected class. So, based off of those actions he took, he said he was unprepared for the vitriol that followed. The anti-vaccination Facebook messages, the sudden spam calls, the misspelled email that warned the band their next show would be their, quote, last, and said, quote, "Your fans are going to kill you." So that's way overplayed, the way they're framing all this. In the next paragraph, you can see they make it clear that one email, that misspelled email, was the only email he got that was really much of a problem. I mean, anytime you're at the center of a huge national story, there's going to be a ton of unwanted attention that comes your way. This happens on either side of the aisle. It's just a consequence of being at the center of that much attention. Some of the attention you get is from people that you don't want to be giving it to you. And so let's look at this one email that he's so upset about. It includes the word, quote, "last" in there. And they said the show could be their last, but they don't have that full thing quoted. They only took the word "last" out. So I wonder what the email actually said. It could be something that's completely different. The fact that they only quoted that single word is highly suspicious. And then it says, "Your fans are going to kill you." That one, it's not like "I'm going to kill you," which isn't even considered like a threat under, constitutional law. Probably not, unless they're, it's definitely not on its own. Depending on the context, it would have to be, more imminent than that, blah, 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 following whatever that case was with the, KKK coming into that town, that Supreme Court case, Brandenburg, I think. But it's saying your fans are going to kill you. It's this guy's saying what he thinks the fans are going to do. And the way I'm reading it, it doesn't even say your fans are going to murder you. It's just like, dude, you're betraying your fans. They're gonna go nuts. Those guys are gonna they're gonna kill you over this. You're really gonna do this to your fans? They're gonna be pissed off, man. And believe me, if there were other parts of the email which made it clear he was talking about the fans actually murdering this guy, the Washington Post would have included those parts of this email. So I feel that one email is, in and of itself, it's not even that bad. And there's only one friggin' email. That's what they're basing all of this off of. What else they're mentioning is some Facebook messages that they describe as anti-vaccination. So God only knows what that means. Anything where, like, if you mention the VAERS database, Wapo would consider that an anti-vaccination message. If you say that it's inappropriate for private entities to be collecting your private medical data, your personal medical data, I'm sure Wapo would consider that an anti-vax message. So God only knows what that means, but they didn't quote any specifics here. And the sudden spam calls. So just the way they frame that is, "Oh my God, it says ah!" And it's just way more emotionality attached in that paragraph than it deserved. Alright. And then they had this other quote from that same guy, from this promoter guy who did the discriminatory publicity stunt. "I didn't know that caring about my community would make me Hitler." So it's this insane self-serving thing where all I did was care about my community. Well, that's not the only way you could portray it. Obviously, it could be viewed as a much more discriminatory practice. It attacks people with autoimmune diseases, blah, blah, blah. But they just let him put that in there without any pushback, without any context put around that quote. And in addition just to being self-serving, it's also something that ramps up the emotions. This is another undue emotion. This article has a few of these points. These are the first two, where it's about driving up the reader's emotionality to suppress their logical interpretation of the story. Alright, and then the last one on that point, on the undue emotion. But I never thought in my life I'd be in a place where I'm getting threatened for trying to play music and spread joy. So, I mean, same as the last. It's just this self-aggrandizing bullshit. He's just trying to just be a hero, just go and help the people. And for absolutely no reason at all, there's just a bunch of evil people coming out of nowhere and attacking him. So, yeah, same problem. One, the attacks he's receiving are way less than they're being portrayed as. And two, he's not nearly as heroic as he's portraying himself to be. Alright, next manipulative tactic is the straw man feigning ignorance. Let's look at the first quote. As the rate of shots slow, public health officials have warned that the country may not reach the oft-repeated goal of herd immunity against a virus that has killed nearly 600,000 people in the United States and slowed the economy. So one thing, you see this particular omission in so many of these articles. What about the natural immunity, the naturally acquired antibodies, the people who already had COVID and recovered? Why are they not counted towards this herd immunity percentage? The one thing you see is the criticism, like CNN did this hit piece against Rand Paul when he said, I'm not getting vaccinated because I already had COVID. They kept saying, but we don't know how long those antibodies last. Well, for one thing, we don't know how long the vaccine antibodies last. In fact, it looks like they don't last all that long. There are all the drug companies that are talking about booster shots. It looks like maybe 6 months is the goal they're aiming for. We have to keep getting vaccinated over and over again every 6 months or so. But those specific details are being worked out. And there's some new studies showing that the naturally acquired antibodies last a lot longer than that. Where, antibodies, they decline after the infection, but then they plateau. They stay in your bone marrow or something to where they can continue to fight off. They're stable for at least a year or maybe forever. So, based off of the current state of science, it kind of seems like it's leaning in the direction that the naturally acquired antibodies last longer than these vaccine-induced antibodies. We still don't really know, but it's crazy that we're not counting those naturally acquired antibodies in the herd immunity. Because they obviously provide something, and the vaccine ones are very much a question mark as well, so. Okay, next one on this topic, on the straw man feigning ignorance. Some states, including Florida, have sought to limit businesses' ability to check vaccinations after a year of coronavirus restrictions being politicized. So, the way they're portraying this is that the Florida law, again, pushing back against vaccine passports, is a part of coronavirus restrictions becoming politicized. What they're not mentioning is that allowing major corporations, because who's going to administer these vaccine passports? It's probably going to be one of the existing big tech oligarchs, one of the three majors. If not, it's going to be some other, privately owned tech corporation, most likely. And what are they going to do with all of your personal data? I bet it's going to be the same thing big tech does every time they have your personal data. They're going to monetize it. They're going to use it to sell you more specific ads. They're going to, God only knows, come up with something more damaging but more profitable. We don't know what they're going to do with it precisely, but the likelihood of them doing nothing with it when they have something of value in their hands and them just doing nothing out of the goodness of their hearts seems highly unlikely. So that's step number one. If we do these vaccine passports, then we're just giving a trove of personal data to these entities who make a business out of exploiting personal data for profit. Do we want to do that? And if we do that, that opens up the door for... you can make an argument that, like, hey, you know, things would be a little safer. We could probably shave off a few annual deaths if big tech knew what medications everybody was on all the time. So let's mandate them sharing you that, or you sharing that with them all the time. And, you know, why not the notes from your psychiatrist? Why can't big tech have all of that? Oh, they'll keep it anonymous. They'll only share general statistics, allegedly, and blah, blah, blah. So it's a very bad idea to let these oligarchic tech entities get into the business of owning our personal medical information. And with the vaccine passports, it's such a shoddy excuse to have them do so anyway. We're mostly through this goddamn pandemic anyway. It's such a low amount to gain at such a high cost. It makes no sense to do these vaccine passports. And that's not brought up in this article. It's just an example of the restrictions becoming politicized. Like, God, if we weren't being just so political, if it wasn't just some dumb Republicans like, oh, lockdowns are bad, then we would all give our private medical data to the big tech oligarchs. Of course. That's what any rational person would do. They're not saying that second part out loud, but that's the argument they're making here. Very manipulative, Washington Post. Good thing we have a 5-sheet. Alright, the last one they have here is one side of the story, where every quote they have, every little bit of narrative framing, is arguing from the one position. That some of the legal discussion as to, you know, whether or not this guy's discriminatory policy would pass legal muster, they have some quotes from both sides, like, I don't know. But beyond that, in terms of the policy implications, the ethics implications and stuff, entirely one-sided. Don't have anyone... And not only do they not have a strong advocate pushing for the other side of the argument, they don't even consider the other side of the argument. So it's clearly an advocacy piece. That's one of the most malicious things that these news articles can do, is just omit things, memory hole things, pretend that things don't exist, and then with our, you know, siloed news sources right now, so many people are not going to read anything that's outside of their bubble. And if Washington Post, New York Times never report on something, then for those people, that thing never existed. You know, so successful with, like, the Hunter Biden laptop story, for example. So many people, once they heard the actual details of that story, like, what the... Alright, whatever. So, what's the takeaway here? I mean, this band, this concert, was supposed to be a punk rock band. I think, you know, they allegedly are a punk rock band, still are. I thought punk rock was about anti-establishment. Fuck the government, yeah! Since when are they about, aggressive compliance and enthusiastically agreeing with the mainstream media. Since when is... I don't know. That is not who I understood punk rock to be. So I looked at the Wikipedia page, and it's not exactly clear when the punk rock movement died. The first wave might have died in the 70s. Later variations might have died in the 90s or the 2000s. But after reading this article, I think it died today.